Welcome to Human Risk, a podcast dedicated to the understanding of human behaviour as a risk. Here's your host, Christian Hunt.
Hello and welcome back to the show. On this extended episode, I'm returning to a really important subject: violence against women. To do so, I'm speaking to an entrepreneur who runs a social enterprise that's setting out to tackle the problem at its roots. So you'll hear not only about the mission, but also the fascinating way that she's going about delivering it. I first spoke to my guest Amy Watson about a year ago. Amy is the founder of HASSL, a social enterprise with the objective of tackling female harassment at its roots and redirecting responsibility away from women and onto society. And when Amy first came onto the show, there's a link to that in the show notes, we talked about the scale and reality of violence against women and her vision. This time round, the focus is slightly different. It's about what it actually takes to tackle it. Over the past year, HASSL has grown from an early stage idea into a global prevention movement with hundreds of thousands of followers, thousands of volunteers across more than 120 countries, and partnerships spanning workplaces, universities, and public services. But this isn't just a story about building a business on social media or launching an awareness campaign. It's about a real attempt to shift responsibility. Instead of asking women to change their behaviour, Amy's asking how we can change the systems, incentives, and cultural norms that allow violence to persist in the first place. So we talk about prevention, the backlash that she's received from some quarters, the concept of moral ambition, how she manages operational resilience, and what it means to build something values first in a polarised world. This is, of course, a conversation about violence against women, but it's also a discussion about risk, reputational, financial, and personal, and what happens when someone decides that a problem is far too important for them not to take it on. Amy was an absolutely fascinating guest, so please enjoy my extended discussion with Amy Watson on tackling violence against women. Amy, welcome back to the Human Risk Podcast.
Thank you for having me back.
I'm very excited to have you here because we spoke about a year ago. I think could have been 2 years ago. Who knows? Feels like a lot longer given the way life is moving. But before we catch up on what you've been doing, for people that didn't hear the last episode, and there's a link to that in the show notes, tell people a little bit about you and HASSL and what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm Amy. I'm the founder of HASSL, which is essentially a social enterprise that's all about tackling harassment at the root all over the world. The main focus is essentially prevention. So it's all about redirecting that responsibility for personal safety away from women, especially as individuals, and onto society as a whole. So we're kind of going against the whole stay safe tips, self-defense classes, safety apps, and trying to actually, not kind of paint this picture where we have to live in a world where this violence exists, but instead, how do we actually prevent it from happening in the first place, rather than piling onto women's mental, financial load in terms of trying to keep themselves safe, which we know doesn't really work because we literally have a violence epidemic against women, not just in this country, in many countries across the world, and in a lot of places getting worse. So yeah, it's all about prevention, essentially tackling especially male violence, but also things like poor public space design, barriers to reporting, generally lack of awareness about the problem, systemic sexism and misogyny, all those things that kind of allow the problem to continue and perpetrators to keep perpetrating violence. So, yeah.
Great. And so for people that haven't come across it before, this is a not-for-profit that you're running, and this comes from your own personal experience. And rather than looking at the world and going, this isn't great, you've decided to do something about it. So your full-time job now is effectively as a campaigner, and it's more than campaigning because you're doing things.
Yeah, so we're essentially working through a 5-stage plan. We just literally 2 days ago launched kind of the end of stage 3. It's essentially a combination of tech, tools, training, strategic partnerships, all focused on prevention. So nothing is about giving women more stuff to do. It's all about essentially removing the load from women and putting it onto men, like inviting men to be part of the conversation, but also onto organizations, businesses, for-profits, public services, making sure they're preventing in as many ways as possible. Again, rather than kind of pushing that personal responsibility for typically male violence onto women.
And so last time we spoke, you were just about, or you launched, I think, and it was at the start of the journey.
Yeah.
Catch us up with what you've been doing in the meantime, because I know from watching your social media, it's not been a quiet year at all, has it?
No. I think the last time we spoke, I think I'd either just launched stage 2 or we were just about to launch stage 2, which was essentially our funding streams. So maybe I'll go through stages. So we launched the first stage when I spoke to you last, which was essentially like our social media platforms and a market research survey. So I always said that I'm going to build this based on what people want around the world, not, just my own opinion. I want to make sure everything is as inclusive and representative, and that we're actually building solutions that people want and that will be effective. So now we're up to almost 9,000 survey responses, which is just constantly getting new ones in, which is helping us build and optimize things, inclusivity, representation, all that kind of stuff. And then we also had launched social media platforms, which now we're at 500,000+ followers organically, which started just over a year and 2 months ago, I think, year and 3 months ago. So that was first stage. Second stage was launching funding streams. So HASSL is a social enterprise, so it's essentially not just reliant on donations, but we're building sustainable revenue streams to bring in revenue essentially to fund everything that we're building, and 100% of profits from everything that we provide goes back into building and HASSL initiatives. So we launched awareness merch, we launched a crowdfunder, and we also launched workplace training, which is on basically more of the human side of things to like your typical HR training that often is more focused on kind of policy and can sometimes feel, a bit accusatory and a bit patronizing and kind of like, just don't do this. Whereas we focus on how to make everyone part of the solution. We say that everyone sits on a scale, men, women, and everyone else. And it's kind of how do we meet you where you are and move you closer towards advocacy, whatever step that is. If you're someone who basically somewhat enables behavior, how do we reduce you from enabling other people's negative behavior? From women who victim blame, for example, how can we kind of unlearn that internalized misogyny? So our training is very like interactive and all that kind of stuff. So we've been working with different organizations to deliver that. Then in stage 3, we launched our volunteer program. So we now have over 3,000 volunteers across the world in more than 120 countries. I haven't counted. The last count was 120, but hopefully more than that by now. But yeah, so we have, as part of our volunteer program, we have a group specifically for men called HASSL Men, which we have more than 500 men part of that, helping work on different initiatives. And again, it's kind of that representation piece, like making sure we're really speaking to men and getting them involved and helping them understand the problem better. We've got a country representatives program. So we've got about 60 reps at the moment who are a rep for their country or state in the US, but we're wanting to get one for every country eventually. That's the end goal. Again, for that inclusivity representation piece and make sure we're like truly global. And what else? We've launched the last thing we just did was, the awareness campaign. So we launched 4 awareness campaigns, which literally we did 2 with our country reps, which essentially cost us nothing. And one I made myself, and another we did was like our first kind of production one. And we did it with one of our ambassadors, she's amazing. So collectively they have more than 10 million organic views just on our pages, but people have also shared them. So they've definitely reached a good proportion of people across the world, in the millions, which is amazing. But all different awareness campaigns, essentially highlighting the problem, speaking about it in ways that is often not spoken about. The last one we did was a contradictions campaign, which is essentially all the contradictory safe rules women are taught and how this deflects from actually, naming the problem, which at the root is male violence. So things like, get a taxi so that I can track you. And then it's like, oh no, get public transport because there's other people around. And then it's like, we just have so many contradictory rules and you can never do anything right. So those hit really hard. I think that one on TikTok alone has nearly 5 million views. So yeah, all organic. And then the last thing that we just launched was free education resources that literally went live on Saturday. So it's a collection of courses, activities, conversation prompts. Again, not so much information and that kind of typical thing that you normally get, but more actually giving people the tools to better understand the problem, to tackle maybe their own, internalized misogyny, misconceptions. So we have things like one designed specifically for men of how to open up conversations with women in your life just to better understand their day-to-day experiences. It's not kind of digging into trauma. It's just, we know that people learn best when they hear from personal experiences and they can connect to it on a human level. So it's kind of how to have those conversations, without traumatizing anyone in the process. And it's also making sure that men are the ones primarily who are self-educating. A lot of the time stuff is designed for women to educate men, and we don't want to do that. We do get men messaging us constantly being like, I want to help, but I don't know how to help. I want to do better. Or like, I didn't really realize this was a problem until I came across you, and now I'm in the bubble and I realize how bad it is. Like, what do I do now? So the tools are mainly focused on that. We have things like bystander intervention and the more nuanced things to think about, especially if you're a man, because being a man and intervening is different if you're a young girl and you're being harassed and then another man comes over that you don't know, you have to be aware of how your presence impacts the situation. So it's all stuff like that. There's a lot of activities, especially for like teachers, parents, for you to take into your workplace and do with colleagues that are just kind of mindset shifting, not supposed to be accusatory, just to make everyone rethink their own kind of unconscious bias and stuff like that. And alongside all of that, I've been working on lots of different partnerships in the background with different, as I say, for-profits, public services, things like that. So we're hoping to launch some of them during 2026, probably some will be 2027. And I'm also writing a book on educating people across the world. So we signed a book deal with a publisher in the US. And so, yeah, essentially writing a book that will hopefully go into organizations, schools, universities. And again, it's all about kind of trying to understand why people have misconceptions and to kind of take them on that journey rather than feeling like making them feel bad for not being there yet, if that makes sense. I think that's everything. There's a lot of other things, but that's probably the main thing.
If anything occurs to you that you haven't, I mean, that's a long enough list, right? But if there's anything else that occurs to you, obviously we can talk about that. One of the reasons I really liked your approach, I got in touch with you to have the initial conversation, and I've kind of closely been watching what you're doing and wanted to get you back on the show, is it really strikes me that your approach is very, very human. So you're looking at the actual problem. And so I think that example of contradictory advice, people are giving advice, I would hope in general terms for, well-intentioned, right? It's like trying to protect people, but it doesn't recognize the realities of, if I'm being bombarded, to your point, with contradictory, do this, no, do that. So what the hell should I be doing? That's not helpful. And equally, the approach towards men isn't to kind of go, you're all awful. Yeah. It's to have a more nuanced conversation that says, look, we have to recognize where you're at. And wish you'd been on board earlier on, but you're not. And that's, so we work with what we have. I mean, traditional logic is sort of, if we mention the problem exists and we give people advice on how to checklist of what to do, the problem will go away. What you're looking at is the real practicalities here and recognizing this involves human beings and emotions and people's past experiences and the whole load. It's messy as hell. And so what you're doing is trying to cut through that. And it's a very, very human approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I never want to kind of talk negatively about other people's work. And I think there are so many amazing organizations and charities out there. But the problem is, like, a lot of the time with policy or saying, you shouldn't do this, people don't do things out of fear of getting in trouble. And a lot of the time, unfortunately, especially within organizations, you kind of know that you can bend the rules or it's not going to be taken that seriously. It gets to a point. Whereas if we can actually appeal to people on a human level, not typically the people who are like the most serious perpetrators, they're probably not going to change just through sort of that human behavior technique. But everyone else that's on the scale up to that point, getting them to be on board as part of the solution starts to shift the culture, starts to make kind of not keep the problem normalized. It's so normalized right now. And it's kind of trying to get those people to step in, to speak up, for women to not be on their own in that kind of situation. As I say, a lot of the time, it's not just men, it is women too, whether they've not necessarily that they enable behavior, some do, and some victim blame and that kind of thing, but also just some accept that it's normal and that this is just what happens to us. And it's, it's quite confronting for people in some ways, but also we've had people that have come to our training and said, I came to this for my daughter, thinking like basically find ways to help her stay safe. And it's completely changed my whole outlook. I've rethought about all these things that have happened to me over time that I just pushed to one side or I just normalized and and they've gone from not even thinking there's a problem to like signing up to volunteer for us in the space of a few hours. And I always say the bar is so low right now with what exists that people go, this is amazing. And I'm like, it's not really. Like, I think it's, it's lovely that people say it's, but, we're doing quite simple things in a lot of ways. It's just making sure that it gets to as many people as possible. It speaks to as many people as possible, and as I say, even just from social media posts, people message us every day being like, this account has changed my life. And I'm like, this is 1% of what I'm planning to do. Like, this is nothing yet. We're just, highlighting things. But for people who have never really confronted it or have always been taught that this is just what happens to you, especially in certain cultures, certain places across the world where it's so normalized, they start to realize they're not on their own. They're not on their own with their experiences. It's not their fault. Like, this is what happens a lot of the time is the stay safe tips aren't just the well-intentioned, but they can make you think, well, I didn't do enough then. If something happens to me, that's on me. And it continues the cycle of people not speaking up, things not getting reported, having, also having this narrative around when things happen that there is some blame on the victim, whereas there isn't. So yeah, it's all kind of really trying to focus on this culture shift side of things. I think there's a lot of policy and a lot of people working on policy, but we see that often that doesn't change things alone without culture shift. And, we have a lot of laws in place in the UK, for example, that supposedly hold people to account when that's not the reality. That isn't the reality. 2% of rape cases end in convictions in the UK. Like, that's crazy. But it's not because the policy doesn't exist necessarily. It's because of all the things that come along with that, all the barriers for the victim, or potentially even just like the police who are involved, their misconceptions, their conditioning. I'm not like putting the blame just on them, but there's just so many elements that come into this. And also, not having the support around you, the people around you thinking, well, maybe it was their fault a little bit, and not all of that stuff could change so much of the policy that already exists in terms of its implementation, follow through, if we have that culture shift. And that's why I wanted to approach it from a human angle. Sorry, that was a long explanation, but
no, it's great. You always keep going. I love this. This is the whole point of having you on, is to let you just talk about this stuff, because I think the passion comes through, but also you wouldn't be doing what you would do if you hadn't thought about it and hadn't had a lot of experience. So I think having you just talk freely is exactly the way to tackle this topic. But I mean, it strikes me when you talk about the law, obviously we need laws in place, absolutely. But I would look at, laws are kind of, they're necessary, but they're not sufficient. And the law is kind of a backstop position anyway, right? We want that there as a deterrent, as a backstop, as a sort of statement by society. But that doesn't solve the minutiae of the day-to-day thing. It doesn't deal with the stuff that the root cause of it. And so what I like is you're recognizing that it's important, it's there. And of course, you'll keep campaigning on those sorts of things, but let's actually tackle this thing at core. But as I listen to you, of course, the scale of what you've taken on is immense.
Yeah.
It's absolutely enormous. And what I love when I speak to you is, that. So you're not unrealistic about this, because you're very easy to sort of say, okay, well, I will just come up with a plan and I will solve this problem. You are fully aware of what you're tackling, and yet you're still going for it. And I guess you would have to be in order to see this through, because the obstacles in your way are enormous, because it's such a big problem. And yet you're smiling now as we talk about it, right? Not smiling about the issue, but smiling about, you recognize that challenge. You're up for this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I always say, and I don't want this to come across in a, vain way, but I think I have quite a unique combination of real strong social justice and like that passion that I've had from being really young. But also I love entrepreneurship, and like often those two don't really come hand in hand. Like a lot of the time, people who are really successful entrepreneurs don't necessarily have social impact front of mind, or, they want to make money. And then the other side, you have a lot of people who have immense kind of social justice and run charities and all this kind of stuff, but they don't necessarily have the entrepreneurial mindset. Or, as I say, I'm not saying that I'm the other person in the world that has this, but I think it's quite a relatively small proportion of people who have that kind of combination of just those two things are my obsessions, I guess, and bringing them together, using that to do something good in the world. And there are examples of people that I look up to that have successfully done things like this, all run their businesses in a way that they very much put social impact at the forefront. But there's very few organizations that I see that are global social enterprises that it's like, whatever, we're going to put in strategic revenue streams to generate the money that we need to do this. And then all of that's going to go right back in. And even down to, I'm avoiding investment at all costs. Because if I got investment, I know it would propel stuff. I've pitched for investment before, I've done all of that, but I'm like, I don't want to for a second risk having someone in that dictates the agenda away from what I'm planning to achieve. So whilst it's obviously a lot more difficult to generate yourself, I'm taking the hard way with everything to make sure that it would be a lot easier to go, let's just do this in the UK or in London or whatever, but that's not going to solve the problem. And I want to solve the problem. Ultimately, that's what I want to do. Obviously, it's not going to happen in my lifetime, but if I can at least set the groundwork. We've done a significant amount in a year. I'm relatively young. Hopefully, I've got a decent amount of years ahead of me. And it's just everything's impossible until it isn't. Like people say, oh, this, everything throughout history that someone has to be the first to do this kind of thing. And yeah, maybe I'm a bit delusional or whatever, but it's worth it. It's my life that I'm, I don't want to say ruining, but it's my career and stuff that I'm sacrificing for this or whatever. So that's what I choose to do. I'm not asking anyone else to do that. And if it doesn't work, it's me that has to deal with the outcome. But
But it's sort of it's a weird test, right? Because the test is sort of this doesn't seem very sensible, right? It's kind of like you haven't, the imperfection is, it's a bit silly. It's never going to work. Why are you wasting your time? All those sorts of things. But I think we said this last time, is I would turn around and go, it's your call whether you're wasting your time.
Exactly.
No one else is,
Exactly.
right? So let's start with that. And the second thing is, my view on these sorts of activities is, you've just acknowledged it. This is a massive challenge, right? So we can look at this and go, oh, well, it's never going to fix itself. Let's not do anything, right? But that's just pathetic. And that's not how we affect change. And so as you're talking, it just seems to me like we're just having a go, right? Let's just see what happens. And there's an entrepreneurial element to what you're talking about, which is you recognize the scale of the problem, and you're going, and my sense is, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is that anything you can do to improve things will help.
Yeah, like
the question is, how much of an impact can you have?
Exactly.
Not can you have an impact, because you've clearly already demonstrated that you can.
Yeah, and as I say, like the bar is so low. I'm like, when people are messaging us and saying, "Oh, I'm like, just you wait. You've seen the tiniest bit of what I'm going to do." So, we already have so many people who say that. So even if we quit tomorrow, we have made an impact. We have changed things for people. We've had people message saying, "Oh, I reported because of you," or men who have come to us and said, I feel ashamed that I was so oblivious, but you've turned this whole thing around that now I'm like, I care and I want to do something. And, as I say, even if we quit tomorrow, like that is an impact. But also I just think, as I say, I don't think people really I look at for-profits that have revolutionized things across the world, right? Take Bill Gates, and not from a social impact perspective, but from a technology perspective, or like Apple, or those kind of companies that have completely changed the trajectory. Why can't we do that? But for social issues, why is it that Apple is all over the world? It's completely changed probably the trajectory of technology and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of organizations like that. And it's just, if we can apply a lot of the same principles, obviously not the kind of exploitative stuff, but if you can apply like Amazon or whatever, I hate what Amazon's about. It's not my ethic at all in any way, shape or form, but they've completely changed. So why can't we use that same stuff? Why is it so impossible that we could do that for social issues? Like it's not. And to me, I think that's just how I see the world. I can see the whole plan so clearly. Everything's kind of happened, in a way, in a better way than I expected, and happened quicker, but I always had this plan. And then new things come in all the time where I'm like, that's another way we can change things. That's another way. It's not out of the realm of possibility. And it's just, like you said, it's my life at the end of the day. Like people will message and say, this is not going to work or whatever. And I'm like, okay, don't follow us. I literally don't care. You don't have to give us money. You don't have to do anything. Even if you just sit and follow along and see, like, what harm is it doing to you? So, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the answer to your question is because there's a perceived difference between operating systems and technology and what I call human OS.
Yeah.
But my view is actually, to your point, change can happen because we've seen it. There's loads of things that we no longer do that we used to do. And actually, if we look at things like social media as a good example, things are massively scalable, right? If you connect with people in the right way, and we have the tools to do that, thanks to technology, interestingly, to actually turbocharge this stuff. So I kind of look at it, if we look at how many, hit songs that go viral or adverts, and the Jet 2 thing would be a really good example, right? Of something that's just sort of ridiculous and has it gone to places where people don't even know what Jet 2 is.
Yeah.
Well, they've got a rough idea because there's a clue in there. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that you will need luck on your side, and you'll need to press the right, all those sorts of things. But it's not sort of sitting there going, I don't know, I'm going to reverse gravity or something. Right? That's something more challenging.
Yeah.
So I find this criticism a bit weird. And it almost struck me that there are people out there that don't necessarily want you to succeed, right? Not because they want to perpetuate, but because what you're proposing is challenging and difficult and awkward.
Yeah.
And I think there's something really interesting about other people looking at themselves and going, well, if she succeeds at doing that, then what am I doing with my own life? And I often think there's a mirror there So I would say we should ignore those sorts of bits of advice because, as you say, it comes down to, am I willing to spend this time doing it? And you've decided that you are.
Yeah,
As far as I'm concerned, it's as long as it's not doing harm to other people. End of discussion.
exactly. Like, I agree. And I think, even just taking stuff, I always kind of use like stop smoking as an example. I remember when there was kind of, you can't smoke inside anymore and everyone was kicking off and like, this is the most outrageous. No, it's just normal. Like no one, like that's just a normal part of life. Like humans adapt quickly. We like to think that we don't. We absolutely do. Like same with getting seatbelts in cars and things like that. Humans adapt and then you see the benefits and then you're like, oh yeah, why were we not doing this before? It's not this major scary thing that we think. Like it's not normal until it is. And you just kind of have to have that view of stuff like for us, what people always say, I don't like the fact that it's women having to do this. And I'm like, well, one, it's not women having to do this because we're not building stuff. We're not literally the whole point. Two, yeah, I'm a woman and I'm choosing to do this. But unfortunately for our history, you don't make change without the oppressed group being the one to take the lead on that. Like that's just unfortunately reality. Same with LGBTQIA plus rights, same with civil rights, like all that kind of stuff. It was the oppressed group first that had to do that before allies and whatever else came on board. But I'm not telling other women to do that. And I'm purposely saying, like, we're building stuff for men, we're building stuff for businesses, we're removing that stuff from you. And I get it. People are so cynical, like, especially right at the beginning, people were really cynical. People thought there was white old men behind HASSL because just trying to make money off women's fear and all that kind of stuff. And I get it. Like, there is so much unethical stuff that goes on in the world. There is so much corruption, all that kind of stuff. But like, I never planned to be the face, like have my face associated with HASSL or anything, because it's not like, that's not my thing at all. Like I don't post on my personal social medias at all. But obviously people were kind of skeptical. And then we ended up kind of going down this different route of trying to take people on the journey. And we now do like weekly updates and like photos of everything that we've done that week and all this kind of stuff. And really trying to build that trust with people. And, it is out of the norm in terms of, a lot of people do want to make money and stuff. And I get that. I always say like I came from a relatively privileged background where I know that I didn't do anything to earn that life. Like that was just pure luck. And for me, I just want to do something positive with that. I'm so lucky that I have family that back me and support me. And, I have like worst case scenario, if this failed, I can go and live with my parents or whatever. Like a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people in countries across the world don't have the privilege to take that risk. And I know a lot of people would want to do what I do, but they don't have the same situation where they can risk their job or they have children or whatever it is. And I'm like, I know I want to use that privileged position to do something. And I know that's kind of feels a bit out of the ordinary because so much of the stuff we get taught is like, just make money and all this kind of stuff. But that's just never, ever been of interest to me. If I'm on this planet, I just want to have done something before I leave that had some kind of, there's so much shit in the world. I just want to do something that counteracts that to an extent. And I think a lot of people, like ambassadors within HASSL, it's been amazing because they're just like, they're people who think so similarly to me in that way, where I don't feel, as I did my degree in entrepreneurship, people didn't really get that because they were very like lovely people, but very much wanted to make money and be successful in that way. Whereas like with HASSL, it's just like the people that I'm around, they have the same values and they just get it. And I think once you kind of meet those people, it just like motivates you even more that you're not absolutely crazy for wanting to do this. And as I say, I think a lot of people would want to do this, but they don't necessarily have the situation where they can take that risk. And, as I say, I'm still young enough, like worst case scenario, I can probably build up my career again and all that kind of stuff if everything failed. And I just want to, there's no comparable feeling for me to making an impact. Like no money, no, I have no interest in celebrities or anything like that. It doesn't, getting a message from someone saying your actions has done this to me. One message like that is more than like, and I do think there's a lot of people out there like that. It's just, we don't hear about them as much. We don't hear from social entrepreneurs and charities in that same way that we do from successful entrepreneurs financially, I guess. So Sorry, that was again a whole other.
No, just keep going. But I think there's several ththoughts occurred to me. I mean, the first one is if listeners are interested in this, and I don't know if you've come across a book called Moral Ambition by Rutger Bregman.
Okay.
And it's talking about exactly this. And it's saying that actually we get more satisfaction from doing worthwhile things than we ever will from making money, because you end up in this trap of, well, how much is enough money? And you can always make more. Whereas actually the impact, and so his book is all around, we should have an ambition to do moral things. And so it's exactly what you're talking about. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes, but highly recommended for anybody that's interested in thinking about some of the things that you've talked about, because I think you are a poster child for exactly what he's talking about. The second thing that occurs to me is, as you talk, is if we thought about it slightly differently in terms of a talent that you've been given as a privilege, rather than the back, you'd sort of be going, if you were good at art or music or whatever it happened to be, and you went and pursued that, you get a little bit of kind of, oh, I'm not sure, but people would kind of accept it, right? If you have a singing potential, you go do that thing. And so it seems to me that you're bringing your skills, talents to bear in a space that you're passionate and interested about. And you've overcome a lot of the hurdles because you really want to do this. So lots of people might have looked at it and gone, that'd be a good idea to do, but you're like, well, this is quite hard, right? And so that in itself is a barrier to entry. So you have this ability to do that. And so it seems to me that we should characterize what you're doing, not as she's taking a massive risk and doing something irresponsible or crazy, but actually just look at it and go, okay, you've been given these things, right? You didn't choose to be born in the family you're born in. You've got a brain, you've got a background, you've got an education, and you've got the ability to do that. So that's just taking advantage of the things that you've been given. And I see that no differently to taking advantage of artistic talent.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just like that representation thing, isn't it, really? And we don't see it as much. We don't celebrate people as much in that space, or, even social enterprise as a space is like relatively new. I don't think as I say, I think we see a lot of kind of like high flyers in terms of financial success and like, especially on social media and things like that. But maybe it is just a representation piece, especially I think as a woman. I always say, when I was even at university, when I started doing entrepreneurship, or I guess started like studying it specifically, the only person I remember having any awareness of that was a woman who was an entrepreneur was Deborah Meaden. And that was the only person that I had any, memory of. I think in the last 5 to 10 years, it's definitely changed a lot. And we see a lot more female founders and stuff like that, which is amazing. But again, when I went to university, I didn't even know what social enterprise was. And then I was introduced to it and I was like, this is what I was meant to do. That was like a light bulb moment for me of like, that's exactly what I was meant to do with my life. But, I wrote my dissertation on this, the fact that can you be typically feminine and be a successful entrepreneur? Because I didn't see that representation at all. And even when I was at university, there was very few women on the course. It was very, very male dominated. And I think it is just, again, that representation thing. And it falls into a lot of what we talk about at HASSL anyway, in terms of, the systemic sexism and that kind of thing. Because if you don't see other people like you in those spaces, how are you going to get there? So yeah, I think it is just, maybe it's not celebrated in the same way. And I also understand that, a lot of people, you aspire to have money because you've maybe never had, when I say come from privilege, we're not rich or anything, but my parents have always been able to, if I wanted to do lessons at school, like music lessons, or, they always supported me and been able to fund that kind of stuff. And, a lot of people grow up with never having that. So I understand that drive to want to, provide for your parents and things like that, give them the things that, I hear that a lot from entrepreneurs who maybe came from immigrant families where their parents moved to give them better life and all they want to do is. So I don't think there's necessarily it's bad if you want to make money. I just think I don't have that same, drive to, I don't have that goal where I'm like, oh, I want X. No, I want to be surrounded by people who want to change the world. I don't want to be in circles of, I literally couldn't care less. That's horrible for me. And as I say, I do think there's quite a lot of people out there like that. And I've met so many people through HASSL who have those same, they all volunteer their time for free. They're not doing HASSL to, because they care about it. And it's just I don't think we talk about that enough. I don't think we celebrate it enough. And I think obviously typically with charity and that kind of thing, it's not necessarily seen as successful if you're senior in a charity because you don't see those same financial benefits. Like they aren't as high paying jobs typically and all that kind of stuff. But, in my opinion, that's better because the value, like the success of, I guess, impact delivery, it's much greater. But it's a reframing of stuff. I think the more we can celebrate people doing that kind of stuff, the more we can have representation. I like to go and talk about social enterprise now because I think that's the way that we change the world. Like, I think that's the path. I think charities are well-intentioned, but they don't have the scalability and the structure and the business kind of mindset typically behind them to do those mass scale impact things. But like, again, it's just, we don't really talk about this stuff, and we live in a capitalist world. Like, people want to make other people make money and feel bad if they're not making money. And again, it's like a culture shift thing, just another side quest of, but if we can get more people into social entrepreneurship, that would be an incredible way to like make a difference as well.
And that's why I think this is super interesting as well, because you're setting out a way of looking at the world.
Yeah.
And a path that could inspire. So your mission, yes, you've got a core mission of what you're looking at.
Yeah.
But I think actually just role modeling this stuff and just showing that it can be done and normalizing it, right? It's okay to do. And so the bit I love about this as well is, yes, you're role modeling for women, but you're also role modeling to men, going, this is an option, right? Thinking about these things in this way is an option. And what I really find interesting about what you're doing is the business brain part of what you're there means you can take risks.
Yeah.
So your point around investors is a really good one, because somebody sets an agenda, and even if they're well-intentioned to start with, they might want to start fiddling or something. Well, you're sitting there going, I'm determined to do this and I'm going to do this my way.
Yeah.
Now that might not succeed, but we've already talked about the fact that success is actually just improving things.
Yeah.
It's not about, climbing the mountain a little bit would be a form of success. You don't have to get to the top of it. You've almost acknowledged that might not be possible, but you're moving in that direction. And so the bit I like is you can take risks. Mm-hmm. And in fact, your entire approach, and this is where some of the criticism I think comes from, is to sort of go, well, I'm not sure she should be doing. I can imagine the sorts of things people would say, and that's let alone people who are critiquing the subject you're looking at, but just your approach. It's kind of, well, that's very risky, or that's very, or you, typical British way, right? Be words like, that's very brave. Those sorts of expressions. Right, yeah, and I'm not quite going to tell you that it's stupid, but that's sort of where I'm at. And the bit I think is interesting is you've set this thing up that kind of, you just embrace that and gone, okay. And the reason I think there's this determination to do it your way is that fits into that entrepreneurial thing, which is like, I have a vision, I'm going to do this. It might not work, but heck, I'm going to find out, right? And I'm going to do everything to make it work. And I'm going to have that business flexibility to recognize that I might need to pivot, I might need to shift. The mission will probably remain exactly as it is. But again, never say never, right? You might see, you've got the flexibility to do that. So it's a very entrepreneurial approach to these things. And I think that's interesting because then it means you're not stuck. It strikes me a lot of traditional charities, we have a mandate and we have a thing and it's got to be very regimented and very structured. We have to report on this stuff and success needs to look this way. And but all for good reason. No criticism of that at all. But I think that gives you a nimbleness and an ability to see this through. And I guess to keep you in the game, you need to feel like you're doing it on your, you've set this thing up, you want to drive it, not in a kind of dictatorial way, but just in a kind of like, this is my, that's necessary.
I just never compromise on my values. Like, that's the number one thing. Like, I never want someone to turn around and be like, but why did you do that? And I have a non-ethical reason as to why that was my decision. So I'm never going to compromise. And the way that you do that is remove as much need for bureaucracy as possible. I think there's a need for bureaucracy because a lot of people won't do things in a ethics first way. So I appreciate the need for it. But I'm, again, I think so many politicians get stuck on this red tape kind of stuff where like they go in with good intentions. I think a lot of people go into politics with good intentions, wanting to change things, but that's not the reality of how political systems pretty much everywhere are set up. They're not, you don't have that time. Like, that's why I was like, we need to be something that's independent of government, independent of public services, independent of for-profits, but that we can be that middleman, or don't say middleman, middle person, where like we're not stuck by any one political party being in power or like by investors or anything like that. And I've worked with investors before, and I think there's a lot of benefit from it. But I'm so certain on what the values are. Like, we get people messaging us all the time because they hate that we're pro-trans. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, we're not changing anything. They'll send me reams and reams of messages. And I'm like, I have reasons for this. Do you not think this is my whole life? Like, I've not made this decision on a whim that we're going to be pro-trans. Like, this is so important to actually solving the problem, regardless of even all of my beliefs about human rights and all that kind of stuff. People message me and say, you're not a real feminist. No. Are you sending me messages? I'm not changing. I'm never going to preach one value and then turn around and go, oh, actually, we don't believe in that anymore. Yeah, let's get rid of, like, in what world is that going to happen? Do you know what I mean? And that's for me. And as soon as, like, there's been a lot of organizations recently, sorry to go off on a whole tangent, but that have had to compromise now, like Girl Guides, for example. There's been a lot of uproar because they've had to compromise on, I don't know the extent of it, and obviously it's to do with like legislation changes and pressures and all this kind of stuff, where they've been pro-trans basically their entire existence, and they sell trans flags in their online store and everything, and now they go around saying we're not having trans women included. I never ever want to be in that position. If I was ever in that position where that I would quit. Like, I'm never gonna compromise on something like that. Like, we've built everything based on the inclusivity. We have, for example, so many trans people that are part of either followers or part of our community, and we let speak, and they're scapegoated so much when it comes to this problem and disproportionately affected by the problem as well. And I'm just like, by you sending me messages, I'm not just going to be like, oh yeah, you're right, actually. Let's just change like I never want to be in that position. And as I say, if I was in that position, if there was no way around it, I would be like, I'm starting to knee them, because I can't compromise on that.
So it's
and as soon as I don't own the majority and things, like, you're not the only one making those decisions. Do you know what I mean? So it's harder, but I'm just so certain that I don't want to compromise.
So that I've got two thoughts on that. The first one is to say that obviously it's kind of built into the way you're going about solving the problem that you're trying to solve is not to go and kind of lecture men and shout at them, right?
No.
Because we know that doesn't work, right? So you're thinking, how do I persuade these people? So it strikes me as being really interesting when people come knocking on your door and use techniques on you, or try and use techniques on you that go against the spirit of what you're doing, have sort of demonstrated that they've misunderstood. Because I would have thought the way to persuade you, assuming you were ever persuadable on something, right, would be to look at how does she go about doing her thing? Oh, okay. Probably not like shouting at her, telling her she's wrong, but that's not going to, because that's not how you're solving the problem yourself, right? So you're unlikely to be receptive to that. So I think that's a kind of interesting misunderstanding. And I love this idea of, no, we're not going to do that, right? If you want to go do your thing, your way, right, go create your own thing. Stop trying to take over mine.
I always say that, like, people will message and say, oh, this should be done in this way, or this could be done better, or whatever. Like, go and do it. Like, I am not stopping. Like, I want other people to tackle this problem. Absolutely. But it is every single decision, like, sometimes people will say, oh, why have you not done more? We get that all the time. And I'm like,
really?
And I'm like, I only have so many hours in the day. But I think, to be fair, I think it's been better since we do like our weekly roundups and all that kind of stuff, because people see day to day the real stuff we're doing. And obviously people just land on our page, look in like 2 minutes, and then like, oh, I don't get, like, what's the product? And I'm like, it's not product. Like, you've got to invest a bit more time in looking at what we do. Like, that's just not the reality, right? But yeah, people will say things like that, and I'm just like, okay, if you can do more, go and do it. Like, amazing. Like, please go and do it, because I am putting every single thing into this. I've used my own money to start this. I'm, like, because things like, I'm building foundations to make this last. I could have gone, let's not do a volunteer program. Like, because they're incredible, but we're not there yet with our internal team in optimizing the 3,000 people that we have, because that's like running a company of 3,000 people. We have a platform, we have a lot of structures in place, but we're probably getting like a few % out of those people that we could actually get once we're in the position to do that. But having those people there, firstly, have been an incredible support to me that I would never have even realized. Like, they're just like amazed, like just amazing. And also, even just from like when we're doing stuff like social media posts and all that kind of stuff, we can go in with them, we can test it, we can speak to like our LGBTQIA plus group and be like, because I'm straight, I don't want to speak for them. I can go in and I can be like, okay, is there anything about this that feels not worded correctly, that feels, because we're trying to speak about your experiences, or they'll come in and give us experiences so we can talk. That matters. I'm not building something to do a quick win and then leave in 2 years. Like, I want this to last, and those foundations, that trust, country reps, for example, like right now, they've done amazing stuff. They've done the campaigns, all that kind of stuff, and it has made a massive impact. But again, having one person in every country, creating that structure, having someone to lead it, having that reach once we do certain things is going to be so invaluable that other people can't replicate that. If I go, I want to do this, I've created this initiative with public transport, and now I want to roll this out in every country possible across the world. We've already got contact points. We've already got people who can translate things into different languages. We've already got people who can help with cultural context. We've already got people who, okay, this is how this would work or not work in our country. These are the best people to approach. I wouldn't be able to do that from Google or whatever. Like, having those people is so invaluable. And yeah, on the surface, initially it can be like, oh, why are you wasting time doing that? Because I'm building something to be scalable, to be global, to actually work, not something to go, oh, I've done a few little campaigns and then see you later. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just, I think people, the more time we have and the more we launch stuff, the more that people get it. I know my brain works in a weird way and not everyone's going to understand, but I have the plan so clear and I know all this stuff is necessary. These kind of, people say, why are you focused so much on social media growth? It's not for vanity metrics. It's because this is the way to reach people across the world organically without having to spend money on marketing. Like, that's the way to do it. This is the way that when we do launch stuff in future, we get mass adoption because we've already built that trust with hundreds of thousands of people across the world. Like, it's all part of a bigger plan. It's not just for the fun of it. You know what I mean? Like, I've got that in my time, but
so that brings me to two thoughts. And Phil, I'll give them both to you, and you can feel free to take them where you want. But I mean, so the first one was I was intrigued by you're very clear on your own vision, and so a year in, how have you deviated from that vision, or is the vision flexible enough to accommodate it? And the second thought I had was, as we were thinking about you, and I quickly sort of said flippantly, not in a dictatorial way, I wondered, what's the control on you? Because in the sense of, you could be well-intentioned, right? We've seen people who are well-intentioned who go off the rails a little bit, right? Who maybe the power goes to their head, or they're so determined that they never listen to other people's voices. How are you balancing those two things? Like, I think they're interrelated, because I think that you need the plan to know where you're going and to have the confidence to see it through and just to want to do it, right? That's part of it. How are you balancing that kind of entrepreneurial challenge of, like, let's put an extreme position in front of you, right? Well, she's a bit dictatorial, or she never listens to us. How are you having those challenges within what you're doing?
So I guess the first question of how far we've deviated, I would say I laid out a 5-stage plan. We have followed that. We've done a lot more additional things. Like, we started the ambassador program, but I didn't necessarily, I don't know, like, certain parts of it I didn't really think about, or they've come from ambassadors' ideas that have gone, why don't we do this? Or people asking for stuff and me being like, yeah, of course, why wouldn't we do that? So I don't think we've deviated really from the plan. Things like writing a book was never part of the plan, but they have put
it's not inconsistent with it either, right?
No, exactly. It still fits in. It's just, it wasn't on the initial schedule. But so yeah, I think if anything, it's become more of what it was supposed to be, because we haven't done any outreach yet for partnerships. Like, all of the partnerships have come to us, which is obviously a very good position to be in. But it's just kind of, I guess, become even more of what the mission is, if that makes sense. Like, we've doubled down even further on tackling it at the root, like, even more so. Like, I'm even more clear that when people come to me with anything that's remotely, oh, why don't we do this so women can? I'm like, no. It's like, no. And it's made that vision even clearer, I think, and made our differential even clearer. I think that's the thing. So I would say it's just become more hassle, I guess. I don't think we've deviated, really at all. I think obviously some things I thought we're going to do quicker, and that's probably my own, I guess, my brain. I like to do things quickly, and then I kind of forget that other people have to be involved. When we're doing partnerships, for example, like I would want to reel up a partnership in like a month, but obviously you're working with external organizations that are massive and they've got sign-off phases and all this. You can't just do that as much as I would love to. But yeah, I don't think, as I say, I don't think we've deviated. And I think from like, that dictatorship perspective, I guess like from the beginning, I've always, we've done this survey. We have a survey even like internally within ambassadors. We have our community where people can suggest ideas and things like that. I've always thought, I always want like a reason behind doing everything, in the sense of, I don't want to ever share something, say it's about, I don't know, experiences of women of color. I would never ever share something without them being at the heart of it and them having reviewed and, I think you can only create stuff off your own personal lived experiences. I don't think, to me, there's no way to not involve other people. Do you know what I mean? Because that completely counteracts, like if I only do it from what I think, that's not going to be an effective solution, because I only represent a small proportion of women in my experiences, if that makes sense. So I think for me, it's like, even if I don't care about other people's opinions, which I do, and as I say, a lot of the amazing ideas have come from other people's opinions, I also think that you can't create effective solutions, which is my ultimate goal, without having other people's opinions, because then I can't speak on other people's lived experiences. Like I've literally only lived as a white straight woman, like in the UK. Like I can't speak on anything else. So yeah, it as I say, even on if I didn't care on a human level, which obviously I do, from a trying to meet our goal, that is the only way to do it, in my opinion. And yeah, I think we've had so much benefit of having this ambassador platform. As I say, it's still probably very much in its infancy of what it could potentially achieve. But yeah, I don't know. And I guess it's just the values that I always have held. Like it's not a new thing to me. And I feel like what I'm doing is for people. I don't think it's like, I'm like, how does this benefit the most people possible? I'm not doing it for me to get somewhere, if that makes sense. So there's
and I think it's almost an impossible question, right? Because on the one hand, you need the entrepreneurial drive to make it happen. Yeah. On the other hand, if that entrepreneurial drive started to be blind to other people's opinions, right? And it's sort of my way or the highway logic. And I like the fact that you started to talk around, here are some core principles, right? And those are the red lines, if you like, that we don't go outside those. You could see situations where this thing gets larger, and there are going to be tensions between, if you like, the democratic process that you might be kind of trying to build with people's opinions, and your need as the driver of the initiative to do that. So those tensions are going to exist, and they're naturally there. And it's, in a way, it's an unfair question. But I think, I guess where I come out on it, listening to you and thinking about it, is ultimately this is about a campaign that wants to speak up about an issue and wants to get people to speak up about an issue and to change perspectives. And therefore, you're probably likely to have a bunch of people joining you as ambassadors and supporters who are minded to speak up about things. And therefore, if the dictatorial trend that I've outlined as a hypothetical really go to bear, I kind of, you've got people that are, one, you're not paying them, so they could walk away and do, easy to set up a competing proposition on something. If you really didn't like it, you can step out and do something else. But the second thing is, you've not hired a bunch of wallflowers who are going to sit there and just do what they're told, right? Because it's not that sort of relationship.
No, and I always say, like, when I'm hiring people, like, not just HASSL, but like previously, I want people who push back. I don't want people who agree with me. Like, that's literally not how you get to, like, some of the best, like, one of the people that works for HASSL, I've worked with her in 2 other jobs. And one of the main reasons that we liked working together, because we argue, we debate stuff all the time. Because if we just both agree on everything, we don't get to the best solution. And not in the way we hate each other, but, but it's so important to have that pushback, because, to be honest, you're going to get that pushback from people anyway. So why not solve that problem before it goes out into the wider world? Like, why not? The whole thing about ambassadors is like, it's almost this huge focus group where before anything goes out, like, you see these campaigns go out and they get such bad PR and everyone's like, this completely missed the mark. We very much minimize that risk by sending out to ambassadors first, who are a pretty representative group of people across the world, and, all different backgrounds, religions, cultures, everything. And at least we can go, okay, you're the first port of call. Let's address anything that could be an issue. Like, it's only a good thing. And yeah, obviously you'll get people like who leave, or you'll get people who join and go, oh, this isn't really for me, and then go. And that's fine. But also I've built it in a way like, sometimes people I don't want to say don't like the fact, but they want more, what's the word? They're so happy to help and they want more and more responsibilities on them, which I would love to give, but I never give anything to ambassadors that has like a time limit or has a fundamental, like makes a fundamental difference to us progressing, if that makes sense. And I don't mean that but I've always said with ambassadors, like, commit whatever time we want. If you want to come and do like a hardcore month and then for 6 months disappear, that's so fine. If you're, we have so many people who have like chronic health conditions and things like that. And it's like 1 week it might be great and the next week they might be in hospital, and that's so fine. And so it's built in a way where everyone can pick up stuff when they want, leave stuff when they want. Certain people over time have showed massive commitment and therefore take a bit more of a, I guess, leadership role as such, and help other people and help new people and all that kind of stuff. But it's very much built in a way where if we had to pause that tomorrow, it wouldn't mean the whole of HASSL would collapse. And it's not out of them not being incredible people. It's just from like that stuff that you're talking about. You can never, until you hire people, you can't, I don't want to put certain responsibilities on people. And even hiring people can leave and stuff like that. So, it is really, I try and take the burden of anything that is fundamental.
So mission critical, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And as I say, there's so many incredible talented people, so many people who want to help and stuff, but either for their own reason, there's no commitment from them in terms of like, if tomorrow they go, I don't want to do this anymore, that's fine. Like, that's so fine. But also I can't give them something that would potentially be the downfall pass. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Great.
No, and it makes sense. I mean, to put it in business terms, what you're talking about there is operational resilience, right? And the idea that you don't want to be overly dependent on one.
Exactly.
I mean, we can use really simple terms, supplier, right? A supplier of labor, thought processes, whatever, right? So that's a smart thing to do from a business perspective, because you go, well, like, I understand I can't build it in a way that is reliant on people that not because they're selfish or anything, or just I can't. It's not designed in that way, and it can't work on that basis.
Life, and they might go, tomorrow I care about this issue more, and maybe I want to give my time to that, and it might not even be anything to do with us, or and that's fine. But that's also why it's great to build a big network, because it's not that if someone leaves from that country, we then have no representation anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it feels because there's so many people who are so fundamental in one way, in the fact that they give me so much support. They're just like amazing people. Like, when new people join, when I don't have time, they're the first ones there, like, helping and stuff. And that is so fundamental in one sense, but it's not irreplaceable, if that makes sense. And if you put too much on one person, and then for whatever reason something happens, like you said, from an operation, it's the same in, like, even if you have a team, like, it's the same thing, like trying to distribute that workload and make sure other people know how to do each other's jobs in case someone's off sick for half a year or whatever. It's that kind of, I guess, what's it called? Like the risk.
Risk management.
Where I'm not going to make, probably the worst thing I do is have too much stuff on me that no one else knows how to do. And then obviously when I'm unwell or whatever, that's probably where I'm the worst at stuff. And obviously where I want to eventually not be like that. But I think that is the natural thing of when you are a tiny team and you are a founder, like, you do end up just doing everything, a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I want to make sure we capture the response that you've had. And you talked a little bit about the response sort of within your ambassadors network, but let's talk about some of the experiences that you've had by launching some of these. And I want to take you to, where I'm going with this. I want to take you to some of the things you've talked about, sort of experiences that you've had of running things on Facebook and responsible social media. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that is, on the one hand, really interesting, on the other hand, astonishing.
I think we get, as far as I see from other people, I think we get a lot more positive stuff on the whole, but we do get a lot of negative stuff directed towards us, more of like trolling and things like that than kind of, I guess, people who are genuinely invested and have an issue kind of thing. Like, that's very rare, and I feel like we are really good at dealing with those kind of things and speaking to people on a human level, explaining why we've made certain decisions or whatever. And as I say, we've had very minimal issues like that, but definitely from a trolling, like hate messages, all that kind of stuff. Every day I hear, obviously, the most harrowing, horrible, horrific stories, not just from ambassadors, but from people who send us things or messages or whatever. And then there's still more. Like, there's still, and you just think it can't get any worse. And then I know it can get worse because but there are just so many things. And so we've had so many situations. This is not a one-off unique case, but we posted about it, where we ran a webinar and, you had to sign up, you would get emailed the link. The webinar was free. It was for just post on our social media for our audience. And yeah, we had someone basically join and then screen share to put porn on the screen. And we got rid of it within 2 seconds or 3 seconds or whatever. But we actually, obviously that was bad enough in itself. But then we posted about it on social media, and the comments on Facebook were just men celebrating this guy, or men saying this didn't happen and we made it up because we put a little thing over the screen, which obviously we have to do because otherwise it's going to get blocked. And also, I don't want to traumatize people in the process. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, we just had all sorts of kind of conflicting messages. But I didn't post on Facebook for a long time because I knew exactly what was going to happen. I'm not an idiot. And then eventually we were like, shall we just do it where when we post on Instagram, it automatically will post on Facebook. So we don't do anything specific, but it's just another way to reach people, especially typically an older generation that our other platforms don't reach. And as I say, we have had a really good, we have about 20,000 followers on Facebook now, which we didn't start that long ago. And we do get a lot of support from it, but the comments on there are horrendous, to say the least. And yeah, it's harder, someone, I have a social media manager, and I have to sometimes I try and go in before and delete stuff so she won't see them because they'll be about her, because obviously she's on our feed a lot and stuff like that. And it is just we talk about it a lot, and we kind of, I think I'm very much in a place where I'm I know the only people doing this are projecting because they have, I don't hate them for it. It's not nice that they're doing it, but I know they're obviously unfulfilled in their lives, and I feel sorry for them, because if that's what you've got to do with your time, sending hate to young girls on the internet, then who are doing stuff that's very non-problematic, in the scheme of things. We had people leaving hate comments on Christmas Day, and I was just I don't know if they celebrate Christmas, but probably do. And the fact that that's the best thing you've got to do with your Christmas Day, I just feel sorry for, you know what I mean? I pity them, and I'm I don't hate you. I find it very hard to hate people. I think it's an ADHD thing where it's the empathy. You can understand why people are the way they are, what shapes people to become like that. And, a lot of the time it is through either, same with people who politically I don't agree with or whatever, it's often through either a lack of critical thinking skills, a lack of IQ, or they've not had the same education where they can understand different points of view, or they're surrounded by people who share those points of view, so they're in this echo chamber of those opinions, or the media pushes those narratives. Typically, when it's more hateful stuff, when it's more kind of, I guess, racist, homophobic, all that kind of stuff, it often comes from where they're told the reason they don't have stuff is because of other people who are marginalized. And, I hate that they are racist and homophobic, and I'm not in any way excusing that, but I'm saying I can always kind of, so many people who commit the worst crimes that you go back and they've had abusive childhoods, and it doesn't, but it rarely comes from nowhere, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So like, I don't know, like, I think when I was younger, I didn't post on social media. I didn't post on social media until I started HASSL, basically, because I was like, I actually can't take I couldn't take any criticism or anything, like, especially appearance wise. Like, I was like, I can't handle that. But I think once you find like a bigger purpose, and then now I'm in a completely different mindset about it, where I'm just like, okay, so it's people that genuinely, were people that were knowledgeable about this issue, and they came in and were giving me hate, saying what you're doing is awful and all this kind of stuff. That would hurt me. And I would obviously take a look and be like, why are they saying this? Because they come from a place of knowledge. But when it's just people that are clearly just unfulfilled or whatever, they have no understanding of what we do, I'm just like, I just feel sorry for you that that's what you do with your time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And what the bit I find fascinating about it is, again, and I'm saying from my perspective, I wouldn't, if you had to put some of these things up, I know it goes on,
Yeah.
but my presumption would always have been it goes on in kind of places I'm never going to see. I wouldn't have expected you to be the target of that, given what you're trying to do, and particularly given the approach isn't kind of like, I hate all men.
Yeah, exactly.
At that sort of end of the spectrum.
It's relatively non-controversial.
Well, it's kind of your whole approach is welcoming in the sense of you're saying, glad you're here. We'll try and work this thing out together. Yeah. You could spin it. I can see how it can be spun into she's trying to re-educate men.
Yeah.
And there's an element of that that's true, but it's done in a collaborative manner.
Yeah.
And hence I'm here, right? Because if I thought you were that end of the spectrum, it wouldn't be a conversation that I would feel comfortable having.
Yeah.
So I was horrified by the tone of some of it. And the bit that I can't get my head around is this kind of like, you put on an event, and in order to get this event, you have to register.
Yeah.
So this isn't kind of just like
no, like you
bad
have
term, but
no,
it's not a drive-by.
Yeah, because
it's literally you have to
right. Where you can just scroll and join in a second. You have to go through a whole process. Yeah.
And so there's some, I hesitate to use the word, thought behind it.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so when I look at those things, I think it's interesting because one, I think again, you talking about it is helpful to raise this because it brings it to the attention of people like me and this is the problem with algorithms. We don't see half this stuff.
Yeah.
I can see things happening if I'm on public transport and someone's getting harassed. I can't see what's going on in a domestic confined environment. I can't see what's going on someone else's social media algorithm. And so I think that's helpful, but it plays into the broader theme here, which is, well, if people are doing this, what else is going on behind the scenes?
Yeah.
And I think it points to the scale of the problem.
Yeah.
And so I think it's interesting as the fact that it goes on. And I think it's good that you highlight it, but I think it's also interesting because it demonstrates, not saying that just because they've said that they would automatically go and do X or Y, but it is normalizing this thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all part of the same thing.
Yeah. And, I always, like often like online behavior spills into real life. Like we know that. And, a lot of the time when we see violence against women and girls, once there's kind of a dig back into the online history, there's all these signs, right, through like online activity, whether it's like watching really violent porn or whether it is like leaving abusive messages and things like that, whether it's stalking people online, like all of those kind of behaviors. So it definitely plays a part, but I also it does benefit us to an extent because when I see these hate comments, it helps me get more and more insight into the way that these men are thinking. And I'm not saying like, I think some of them are beyond any kind of, I don't want to say any kind of help. I think most people are redeemable, but like us doing stuff is not going to be the solution. It needs to be very much, more intense intervention. But it does say so much of the time, like we'll get certain comments like repeated over and over again. Like, for example, we get them all the time about women making false accusations about rape, which again, it's just so misquoted and so misunderstood. And it's just like, but then I go, right, I'm going to take this comment and then I just break the whole thing down on socials. And I'm not saying that those people who've left the hate comment are going to respond in any way, but there's other people out there that are probably thinking that and won't say it. And if it can reach them and you can start to, we try and hook them in with that. Like, for example, like we get people all the time going, well, are you going to deal with violence against men because that's even higher and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, instead of me getting annoyed that they're sending this, I just use that we have it as a hook on a post, and we go, you're building a movement to talk about against women. Well, men receive more violence, so what are you doing about that? And then I just go through and break the whole thing down and explain it. And I'm not saying that those people, are going to listen, but there's a lot of people who will think that and won't necessarily post it, and are probably higher up that scale, as in if you can just break down that misconception and explain, by tackling violence against women, we also help reduce the violence towards men, because typically the majority of the time perpetrators of violence towards men is still men. So it's still benefiting you. But there's a whole different power play that comes into play when it's violence towards women from men. And once you can, and it's, I use the example like, what are you going to go to a children's charity and say, well, why do you only deal with abused children? What about abused adults? Adults get abused too. What about it doesn't mean that the problem doesn't exist. It's just, this is the problem we're choosing to tackle from this angle. Do you know what I mean? It's why have you got a charity to help homeless cats? What about homeless dogs? Well, it doesn't mean that problem doesn't exist. Like, do you know what I mean? And if you can just actually explain to people like that, it can break down some of those barriers, especially to people who are a bit more on the fence about it. So in a way, like, a lot of the trolling, obviously not the ones that just tell us to go and like kill ourselves or whatever, like that's obviously not great. But a lot of the ones where they kind of have some comment, there's one that gets floated around all the time, which is about, well, the highest rate of domestic violence is in lesbian relationships. I see that all the time. And it's a complete misuse of a study, which essentially says that women who are with people who are in lesbian relationships are more likely to have experienced domestic violence. That isn't from that relationship. That's typically from heterosexual previous relationships. And because two women are in that relationship, you've got double the chance of a woman experiencing violence, right? That's what the study says. But they take that study and they misuse it. So like it's not going out yet, but we've done a post on that, which actually explains what that study actually means. And like, you might have seen this, you might have even said this, you might have quoted it. This is what it actually means. That the study isn't saying that domestic violence is highest in lesbian relationships. It's saying people who are in lesbian relationships are most likely to have experienced domestic violence. And that's typically from heterosexual relationships, especially like if they're like bi or whatever, that they've experienced in the past. And because 2 out of 2 in the relationship rather than 1 out of 2 in a heterosexual relationship are women. So obviously there's a higher rate because women are more likely to be victims. So
right, it's an analysis of the victims, not the perpetrators.
Yes, and it's just like, there's so much misinformation like that online. And as I say, the people who comment in it they're probably too far gone but there'll be many other people, especially men, who will have seen those things and kind of think, yeah, well, they might believe it because they don't understand it. And so if we can take those things, whereas I don't know what they think if I don't see those things. So not to give them credit, but I do think to an extent.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's interesting. So you're sort of flushing out a little bit.
Yeah.
And therefore can do something with it. So I think that's interesting. But I mean, the reason I wanted to raise that as well is I wanted to say thank you, because you have made me recognize that and thinking about algorithms and what I see is I'm going to see a very small, I have to be connected with someone and for that, for some sort of pylon to occur.
Yeah.
And so I've seen a few times, and I decided off the back of reading your stuff that actually starting to think about we should, if speaking up online is a start point. Obviously, if it's in the physical world, of different dynamics, but still important. And so I experimented with it. And the bit that I found incredible, and this is all credit to you and other people that have sort of persuaded me this makes sense, is it's really interesting when as a man, you call this stuff out. Because I was expecting, and the hesitation I always had was, oh God, here we go. I'm going to get involved in something. It's going to be whatever.
Yeah.
Typically, I found that when you don't do it in a nasty way, you can do it in a kind of nice way. Typically, people, they don't respond, or they block me, or they do some sort of climb down. And so the battle that I had feared I was going to have, which is pathetic, right, is that I can look after myself. But none that I thought was really interesting. And so that kind of got me just thinking, actually, it is really easy to intervene as a man, and we can make a difference. And so I wanted to thank you for nudging me to doing that, because I've had nothing but good experiences. And I think it's really, really important. And I think that's part of your mission, is getting people to think in those terms. And so I think seeing some of the extreme stuff made me realize that some of the stuff, what I might have just been able to write off as a soft bit of banter, whatever excuse I wanted to use, is part of the same problem.
Yeah.
And I think that's a critical. And so you have landed with me, and I suspect loads of other people, on things like that. And that felt to me to the start of, well, actually, where else could I intervene? Because this is quite fun, actually, right? I feel like I'm doing something useful as opposed to just letting it occur.
Yeah. And I think I said to you before, one of the things that I like is like when we do get these hate comments, especially on Facebook, a lot of our male ambassadors will go in and respond. And like you said, typically not in an aggressive way, but almost in like I understand how you can think that, but, and then explain it. And I think one, they don't expect it from men. They don't expect other men to come back to them. It's a lot easier for them to argue against what they identify as being a woman, because they're just like, that's their normal default, right? Where typically it's women that are going to push back on their comments. And when a man does it, some of the time they'll just, like you said, either stop replying or have a bit of a go or whatever. But a lot of the time it does actually make them either stop or potentially rethink, because they're like, oh, there's another man. It's not just women saying this. There is actually other men. And it is so like, I think we see this in real life as well. And it's annoying that was the reality. But when men step up and back women, it makes so much more of a difference, because women are so used to being ignored. And, this is not just like online, like in the workplace, for example, we've got it in one of our courses, but there's like really simple things like in a meeting. Like I've experienced it, and I'm obviously a chatter, like I can speak, where men will just speak over you or will say your idea that you've just said and say it's their own. And even just simple things going, oh, well, actually, Amy just said that 20 minutes ago and we ignored it. Or can we just go back to what she was saying? Because those tiny interventions, as a woman, if you do that, not just yourself, but like even for other women, it can be more likely to be ignored, or she's being annoying, because that is our subconscious bias that we've conditioned to have. Even women will think that, oh, she's being problematic or whatever. When a man steps in and goes, I think Amy already said that. Can we just go back to what she was saying? Or you've just spoke over her. Let's go back to her verse. Those tiny things, not only do they make you feel like it seems like such a small thing. I'd be elated if a man did that, because it's such recognition of the problem, but also it starts to set that example for other men and be like, okay, and then we can start to shift that culture where it's like the embarrassing thing is men that speak of, like, that's embarrassing. Like, what are you doing? Like, that's the point we need to get to, where it's like the people, I've talked about this a lot, where I don't really like to use the term male allies, because I like to say just being a man. Because if you say allies, that's saying that the default human is not an ally of women. And why don't we just say people or humans and misogynists, or humans and sexist, or humans and homophobes? Why is it LGBTQIA plus ally? Like, I understand why we have to do that, because we're not in that point yet. But if we can reframe it as being a man is doing X, Y, Z, rather than being an ally is, or being a feminist. No, this is just being a decent human being. And this is having empathy, and this is believing in equality. And also it helps, and especially I think younger men who, if we're going to say, oh, I'm a male ally, they start to feel excluded and like they're an outsider. And if we can if we can change the framing to be like, no, this is being a human being, and anyone who isn't like that is the outside, it starts to increase that incentive to be part of the inner circle of good people, if that makes sense. So that's why I'm trying to talk in a way that's like, this is what being a man is. And because also we don't want to talk about in a way that like you're the greatest person ever, if as a man in a meeting you go
setting the bar really low, right?
Exactly. We don't want to set that bar low, and we shouldn't have like such a different bar for men and women. So it's not again, like we try and celebrate as much as possible, where because people will message us and be like, oh, men like will always be the same, they'll never change. And we actually get so many now who message us and like say things, and so many men behind the scenes who do a lot. And like we'll post and we'll say, look, we're not saying this is like the best, most incredible thing ever in the world, and we should be like bowing down to these men and being like, you're the greatest humans to ever exist. But I'm trying to show you there is a glimmer of hope, and there is people who genuinely do care. And if we just shut down and say all men won't do this, then what is their incentive to help? And there is there's more men, from what I can tell, that have bought merch from us, that have backed us. Our male ambassadors, even though they're a smaller group, do hell of a lot of work behind the scenes. It's not performative. It's not, what people claim it is, or performative allyship or whatever. They don't get credit for it. It's behind the scenes. You don't even know. So I know that there's potential out there. And it's just, it's not celebrating people for doing the bare minimum, but it's trying to show that, like, there is hope. There is people who do genuinely care. And these people can set examples for other people. And we can start this snowball effect where younger men see an alternative path to these toxic narratives, where you can be a man and you can be all successful and muscly and whatever, all those kind of things that you want to be, and still like women, still respect women, still treat them as equals. That's not mutually exclusive to being a man. If anything, that is what being a man is. And that's what we're trying to reshift that kind of narrative.
Love it. I love it when you talk about this stuff, because it just flows out, and it's coming from you. No, it's good. But the other one that I always find astonishing is this kind of like, somebody will talk about something that's happened to them.
Yeah.
A woman will explain experience, and then you get this male response of, well, that's never happened to any women I know.
Yeah.
Which I find interesting. Is at first thought, just because they've never told you about it doesn't mean it's not happened. And more to the point, if you're broadcasting that sort of message, you don't exactly send a signal that you're the sort of person that's receptive to that kind of thing. So I just find this strange sort of thing like, well, and it points to, I don't believe you. And it just seems to me that we would be better off just, if somebody says something has happened, why isn't our start point, I'll listen to you and I'll believe you.
Exactly.
Yeah. And fine. If it turns out that they're a fantasist, right, and there's evidence that, and of course people make things up, right? But generally speaking, when we have a large swathe of the population telling stories about stuff that's happened to them, it's probably a good idea. We know this from plenty of other contexts. It's probably going to start from the context of maybe, just maybe, they're telling the truth. Why don't we start from there?
Literally. Like, it's like we do this in court where we go innocent until proven guilty. So, like, let's apply the same logic. Like you said, it's not, we've done posts on both of those things, actually. On there, we've done a hook where it's like, well, I don't know anyone who's been assaulted. So, and then we break it all down and we say, one, it could be because you're actually not a nice person and they don't want to tell you, because obviously but there's also lots of other reasons. Like, I won't tell my dad everything that happens because I don't want him to be upset, because there's literally nothing he can do about it and it'll make him feel bad. And there's all those kind of things. It doesn't mean you're necessarily a bad man. If people's not told you stories, there is a lot of other reasons, but this is why we have this course about opening up conversations, because here's the tools for you to actually go, before you go, that's never happened. Have you actually ever had that conversation? Have you created space for that conversation? Have you talked about women on the TV and newscases, which is clearly lying? Because if someone said that sat next to me, I'm not going to tell you what's happened to me. And it's all they're trying to rewrite that thing of, there is no benefit to lying about this for women. Women don't come out, even when women have successful cases against men who have done the most horrific things to them. Very rarely does their career just skyrocket and they become this. The majority of the time, even if you are successful in convicting someone of something, which is very rare after speaking up, and women know that, which is like, there's so many reasons to not do it that you've got to take that into account. There's so many barriers. There's so much public shaming. There's so much judgment from people. There's people telling you you're lying. You have to face your own trauma. Like, most of the time people would rather just bury it. There's all these things that are barriers to say right anyway. And knowing that the only thing really that's going to come out of it is negative stuff the majority of the time. Even those very rare cases where you do get to a point where people say, like, there's this Pete Diddy thing going on at the moment, and there is, like, he didn't, the whole court thing, just like the juror thing frustrated me so badly, and there was so much, I won't go the whole thing, but it's like, there is literal evidence of him beating this woman, dragging her down the corridor. So many people with stories about him, not just women, men too, all this kind of stuff. And he's still fine doing his thing. Oh, these women, are they stupid? No, because people go on, well, she might cause us a problem or whatever. There's very little benefit to speaking up. So believe people, because especially women, because it's probably against every benefit to them possible to speak out and to talk about these things. So, it is, like you said, it's about changing that default thing of actually, let's believe first, and worst case scenario, if they're lying, this whole false accusation thing has like now created this whole other narrative around why we shouldn't believe women, when it's like as a man, you're firstly like, can't even remember how many times, it's like hundreds, if not thousands of times more likely to be sexually assaulted by another man than you are to be falsely accused of sexual assault by a woman. So the problem is still male violence. So the problem still benefits you far more. But again, it's this whole narrative. It's just like anything we can do to keep the problem existing in the same way. So it's just like, if you can actually go to people, like, it doesn't always work, but if you can go to people and break down these misconceptions, I know so many men will see that post and be like, oh, I've never, like, see someone comment and be like, I've never, and they've gone, yeah, I've never either. So I agree with that. And then if you can actually see a post and go, and then we can actually break it down and be like, this is why you might not have heard these stories. It doesn't mean they didn't happen, and just start to break it down. It's actually been so successful for us. Like, there's some of our best posts, they go the most viral. We get a lot more male followers from them. And it's just like creating that path of least resistance to get people, like you said, you're obviously like very knowledgeable about like behavior and all this kind of stuff. And, from our conversations, probably relatively high up the scale in terms of like men typically and look at it, but it's still opened your eyes to more stuff. And it's like, the more you can just open people's eyes and give them another path, like the same as any social issue. I don't think this just applies to this, but yeah.
Yeah. And I think, what I found really interesting is, and I think this is why I love your approach, is it isn't you're either with us or you're against us type logic, which I think is so sort of off-putting. It's an attempt to sort of go, let's just meet you on that journey and put things in front of you to help you think about this stuff. And it's almost what I would describe as leading the witness slightly, in the sense of you're giving people a guide to where potentially they're not, you're not saying you're wrong.
Yeah.
It's like, let's just help you think about this in a different way.
Exactly. Like your own conclusions.
And that for me is a lot of the power of this stuff, because you could come at it in a very militant way.
Mm.
And we've seen lots of examples of that, and that just doesn't work from a human perspective.
It doesn't.
And so as I listen to you, what I love is, and this is totally outside the subject. One of the things is you have channeled your energy in a really positive way, which is like, we solve this by being more human.
Yeah.
We don't solve this by being theoretical. We don't solve this by, it's not actually necessarily always by being logical.
No.
We solve this through emotional connection with people.
Exactly.
And trying to see things from their perspective. And we also recognize that small steps are the way you get those. Because, the number of times I've come across this sort of, you're not part of this, the classic sort of, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Yeah.
Well, you have to be part of the problem to be part of the solution, actually.
Yeah.
And so I think, all of this stuff I absolutely love. And so what I want people to take away from this is, yes, the core topic you're talking about, but your approach, I think, could work in so many other contexts. There's so many other things, that just thinking in these terms, I think, unlocks a whole load of progress.
Yeah.
That it gets locked because people, for well-intentioned reasons, often don't think like you do, don't talk about it the way you do.
Yeah, I always talk about, because I feel like, I kind of preach this approach, but I haven't always thought this way either. And it has been not like the full hassle, but, I always say, when I was younger, politically, I'd be like, if you don't believe in my values and ethics, you're either selfish or ignorant, and that's it, right? And I used to see it as very black and white. I didn't have time for it, because I've always believed like having empathy for other people and all. But then I was almost like, but I'm not even carrying my own values there. If I'm, because I was so like, equality is everything, like all this kind of stuff. And when I saw people that didn't agree, I was like, I have no time for it. And I'm like, but then I'm almost like not following my own things, because I'm not having empathy for where they're coming from, and I'm not understanding. And I'm also not recognizing my own privilege of being brought up in a house where I was always taught about this stuff. I was taught about the problems across the world. I was aware of my privilege. Like, my parents carry very similar values to me. Like, I don't know if I was brought up in a household full of misogynistic, racist people, that I wouldn't, I like to think I wouldn't think like that. But you don't know, because you've never been in that position. And I meet so many people where on a human level, I can tell they're a decent person. They care about their family, they care about their friends, they want to do well in life. And then they hold these most horrible values. And when you start to unpick it, again, it's stuff that we already covered, but it's like the media narratives and the lack of maybe critical thinking and all this kind of stuff, and the bubble of people that they're surrounded by. And you either say you're a lost cause and push them further into those toxic narratives and have more opposition to it, or you actually create, I would say, like a path of least resistance where you can try and understand why they think the way they think and start to unpack that and not come at it in an aggressive way, but come at questioning it and being like, oh, well, why is that? And like, why do you think that? And trying to like help them. People almost sometimes come to those conclusions themselves because you're like, but then isn't that their fault? And they're like, yeah, oh, like, and it's like these moments of realization. And, you know, I do think there's, I literally did a post like this the other day on Facebook, not on Facebook, on LinkedIn. And I was like, I do think there's people at the top who know exactly what they're doing and who are just selfish and corrupt and whatever. Like they know what they do. But I'm more speaking about like the general public who get sort of manipulated a lot of the time into these toxic narratives and blame, you know, it's orchestrated to blame each other rather than blame the people at the top. The way that people say at the top, like that's literally how it works. So
yeah, it's divide and conquer. I mean, literally, right? It's the oldest playbook in the...
Absolutely. So if you can actually, you know, we actually had this discussion in the ambassadors call the other day because I was saying, I'd seen this post about what's happening in the US basically, and people were saying, someone had done a post basically saying that people who were in MAGA and are now whatever it's like defecting or whatever, like basically coming out of that whole cult, I essentially think it is. Do you give them open arms or do you hold them account to what they've done? And I think firstly, those two things aren't mutually exclusive. I think you can invite them into a better space, but also say what you did was not okay. And like, there is consequences to your actions. But, you know, loads of people in the comments say, I could just never like speak to them again. I could never forgive them, blah, blah. And I don't think on a personal level you have to, but I think as a society, we have to, if people change, we have to create the space for them to execute that change of behavior. Because if there's no acceptance of people can change and people can do better, then we just stay exactly where we are and we don't ever do better, right? And it's not easy to give people grace. Like, I understand that. And especially like if you've had really personal traumatic incidents, it's really hard to forgive people. But it's like restorative justice and all this kind of stuff. Like, there is a point to it. And again, if you say, well, you were in MAGA, so that's it, you can never come back. Why would they not just stay there then? Like, you need more people on the side of empathy and understanding. And if we're going to preach that as being important to the world, you also have to extend that to people who don't agree with you. And it's not an easy thing to do, but like, and say, I didn't always think that way. And I just think it's hard. It's really difficult on a personal level. It's so frustrating. But if you actually want to create long-term change and you actually want to create a better world, then we have to give space for people to do better. Like, we have a men's call and we say, like, you don't have to join HASSL Men and be the most perfect ally. Like, that's not what I just want you to, if you want to learn, you can be in it. And women will ask us, can I join this call? And I'm like, no, I'm the only woman that's in that call. And for a reason, because I'm creating a space where they can ask anything. And like, anything you've wanted to ask a woman, anything that is like your criticism of this whole thing, ask it here, because I want to give you the space to ask it so we can actually talk it through and address it, rather than you thinking toxic things, keep thinking it, or traumatize women in the process by asking them. Like, this is what this space is for. And that's why it's important to have that space. Do you know what I mean? Like, otherwise they'll just keep thinking the same things because they'll never ask it, or they'll ask it and just ask the wrong person and cause them a whole load of grief, and we're stuck in the same place. So I make it really, I'm very specific on like, it's only me that's going to be in there, because I want them to ask questions that they almost like feel they shouldn't really be asking, but they think it. So that's how we don't change mindsets, right? So yeah, that's, again, the whole explanation. But sorry, it's the longest podcast ever. But
no apologies, because I think it's really important that you talk about this stuff, and I want to give you the opportunity to do that. So, Amy, we could, both of us, keep talking forever, but time is as ever against us. Thank you for being so generous with yours. I guess the next logical question is, you've achieved a heck of a lot in the years since we spoke, and I really look forward to seeing what happens in the months and years ahead. But what's kind of up on the agenda now? What's the next phase?
So for us, as I say, we've just launched kind of the end of stage 3. So now we want to focus, at least for the next few months, on kind of optimizing all that stuff. So as I say, we've got workplace training, we've got these free resources, all this kind of stuff. We want to, the ambassador platform, we want to optimize and make sure they're reaching as many people as possible, that we're, essentially getting the education for as many people as possible. And as I say, we're already working on a lot of partnerships, so we're going to continue working on those and hopefully starting to launch some of them. Then the next stage after that, when we carry on with the kind of 5-stage plan, we have full programs alongside partnerships. It's kind of our key thing for stage 4. And then stage 5, plan is to launch some reporting technology to basically break down the barriers to reporting that allows this problem to continue, allow people to be repeat perpetrators, all this kind of stuff. So that's kind of, alongside that, I have a lot of other projects I guess can't really disclose right now. But again, trying to completely change the way that we've looked at this problem, and just basically loads of different things that focus on putting that responsibility on organizations, businesses, especially universities, all that kind of stuff, rather than on individuals, and creating more and more space for men to be part of the solution. So I guess I can't really divulge too much, but yes, there's a lot of other things.
That's more than enough. And you've got a book to write as well, obviously.
Yeah, I'm doing that as well. Yeah.
Amazing. If people have been listening this long, Amy, they're either going to know you already, or they're going to want to find out more, right? How do they do that?
Yeah, if you stayed this long, you're incredible. Yeah, so if you want to find out more, you literally go to the HASSL website. So it's www.hassl.uk. HASSL spelled HASSL without the E.
Remind us what that stands for.
It stands for Harassment Awareness and Safe Space Leaders, and it also refers to the hassles of experiencing harassment, catcalling, violence, whatever, the hassle of reporting it. And we always say we're trying to work to a hassle-free world, so the end goal is that hassle doesn't exist. That's the overall mission, really. So my job will be done if we no longer have to exist, basically. And there's loads of different ways to get involved. We have our survey, which you can do it in 5 to 10 minutes if you've not got much time. You can join the ambassador program if you want to volunteer some time. There's no time commitment, but especially if you're a man, the more representation we have, the better. There's loads of different things to help with. Our ambassadors helped with testing resources before they went live. We're going to do more of that. We have, we run about 12 meetings a month for different groups, so university, for men, for teens, all different things. So there's a group for you to join, basically. We also have by profession groups if you have certain professional skills that you want to contribute. So loads of different things in that. You can also support us financially. So if you can buy merch where they all have little conversation starters on them, and 100% of profits from merch goes back into what we do. You can book workplace training or recommend it to your employer. Yeah, there's loads of different things you can do to support us. Follow us on socials. We try and give loads of updates and things like that. Go use education resources. They're free for everyone, forever. Loads of tools and different things, depending on where you're at kind of in your journey. Activities you can use with family, friends, kids, students, if you're a teacher, parent. Yeah, loads of things. So, yes.
Amazing.
Be amazing.
Well, as people will either know or have picked up on this call, you are an absolute force of nature. I love what you're doing. I particularly love the way you're doing it. Thank you for helping me and all the thousands, if not tens of hundreds of thousands of people out there as well. Keep doing what you do. You don't need my encouragement because you're on that mission already, but thank you for all of that. But above all, thank you for sparing the time and being such a fabulous guest on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me again.
So that's it for this episode of the show. My enormous thanks to you for listening, and of course to Amy for appearing. To find out more about Amy, HASSL, and the work that they're doing to tackle violence against women, have a look in the show notes. You'll find links to those there, as well as a link to Amy's previous appearance on the podcast. There's also a link to Rutger Bregman's book, Moral Ambition, which I think perfectly sums up the spirit of what Amy's doing. If this is your first time listening to the Human Risk podcast, where have you been? But thank you so much for joining me. You can subscribe wherever you get your quality audio content. It's available on all of the major podcasting platforms. If you like the show and have yet to leave a review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to it on, please do so. It really does help. To discover episodes of the show that you might have missed, and there are over 350 of them now, have a look at the show's website, which is humanriskpodcast.com. I am sure you'll find something there of interest. If you're on LinkedIn and want to follow the show there, other social networks coming soon, then you can subscribe to the Human Risk podcast page to get updates whenever new episodes appear. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the show, but in the meantime, stay safe. Hopefully take some inspiration from not only what Amy is doing, but the way she's going about doing it. I think she's an absolute force of nature and has some fascinating ideas that we can all learn from if we want to make the world a better place. But above all, thank you so much for listening.